Hello, everyone. Are you a dog lover? Someone uneasy about dogs in general? Or specifically more nervous about certain dog breeds? The media and individual experiences have helped shape public opinions, assumptions, and expectations of behaviors based solely on the dog's breed. Do you question the picture the media has portrayed to the public? Is it really the breed of dog that's solely responsible for bad dog behavior? Or is it more complex than that? Want to know what dependable scholars have discovered in their research on the subject? Well, you have come to the right place. It is so important to educate ourselves on topics that affect lives, especially when those lives can be taken from their families and cut short at the hand of the law. Some may find it silly. I know my fellow animal lovers don't need explanations on why we feel so strongly that their lives matter. Those that might need a little more convincing as to why we question the law so stubbornly and would dedicate our time to research the matter, please stay with me. Just a few minutes of your time. I'm hopeful that we can surprise you, maybe even dare to change your perspectives. I understand some have personal stories of being on the receiving end of an aggressive dog attack. I recognize that your uncertainties and your reservations come from a deeper place. I hope this video will be helpful and informative. I will be sharing some credible information about research conducted by reliable scholars. What are the explanations behind the dogs that display aggressive behaviors? The age-old question, what's responsible? Their nature or how they're nurtured? Alexa Haymond and other researchers did a research study that evaluated the important biological assumptions that are targeting specific dog breeds and supporting the stereotypes fueling the creation and passing of legislation. Their study compared 8 dog breeds feared and labeled as aggressive with 17 breeds that are not labeled as such. The results of this study for all of the dog breeds exposed large differences within all of the measured behavioral predispositions. It was determined that the breed of dog is not a reliable way to predict what their individual behaviors will be, specifically aggressive behaviors. As they broke down the data, the components specifically linked to aggression and fear displayed that the psychometric tools, which refers to an assessment that measures personality or potential, can correctly predict aggressive tendencies in dogs. Additionally, demonstrating that the assessed behavioral traits of the dog owners can have a strong inherited factor and therefore may serve as good predictors of individual behavior problems. In other words, the research supports the idea that aggressive behaviors are not breed specific, but rather context specific. If an individual dog is displaying aggression, look at the context, investigate the dog's history and environment, not the breed, because majority of the time those dogs have or had owners who mistreated them, in cases of owners specifically training them to be aggressive. Consequently, breed-specific legislation is unlikely to be an effective instrument for reducing risk, a direct quote from the research of Alexa Haymond and others. Before we go any further, a quick overview of the legislation that was created in an attempt to prevent dog attacks and keep people safe. The legislation is titled the Dangerous Dogs Act. This was put in effect in 1991. Made the following dog breeds illegal to own: Pit Bull Terriers, Japanese Tosa, Doggo Argentino, and Fila Brasileiro. Please forgive my pronunciations. I'm not very good at that aspect. They chose these breeds based on the assumption they are only bred to fight and therefore inherently aggressive. The initial problem with this legislation was they could take a dog away from their family based on their looks, regardless if they are a mixed breed. The dogs didn't need to commit a crime first either, which means dogs that had never acted aggressively a day in their life could have theirs taken, simply because they are stereotyped to have the look. Does any of that sound fair? Pretend for a moment we are not talking about dogs. What would we say about this then? We will come back to that question. Back to our quick breakdown of the legislation. The law doesn't define the number of characteristics needed to claim it's the aggressive type, nor is the person trained that is responsible for determining if these dogs check off all the wrong boxes. Therefore, it's all based on personal perceptions and interpretations. not solid facts. If these dog owners have DNA results for their dogs, they will not be allowed to use this evidence to save them in the court proceedings. The sad reality is most of these dogs will lose their lives first. And if they do get to go home to their families, they are often returned in conditions of poor health. They have since made amendments to the legislation. While these amendments have made this slightly less horrific, it still remains unjust and stressful for their dogs and their owners. The amendments require the owners to follow a list of stipulations, such as having to register their dogs and muzzling their dogs when they're outside, etc. So now that we have a better understanding of the legislation, we can further discuss the dog breeds that are being targeted and perceived as aggressive. On my research for additional evidence, I found a scholarly article whose researchers intended to study the differences in 5 behavioral traits: the dog's aggression towards people and or other animals, how they respond to training, their activity or excitability, and their fearfulness. They looked at these traits for different standard groups of dog breeds. The breed groups they used were those said to be potentially aggressive, working dogs such as herding, hunting, and guard dogs, as well as companion dogs and mixed breed dogs. The authors of this study reference other similar research studies when discussing their results. They all came to the same conclusion, that it is irresponsible to label individual dogs as an aggression hazard based solely on its breed. They determined that aggressive behavior is not a universal trait among dogs, but rather a learned response to their circumstances. These so-called dangerous breeds demonstrated less aggression compared to other breeds. One of the research studies they referenced validated a theory called acculturation of contact hypothesis. This theory concluded that using generalizations and stereotyping dog breeds mirrors the phenomenon of racism in humans. The extent and nature of interaction with dog breeds significantly shape the predisposition towards making unfair judgments about them. A direct quote of their summary. I know what some of you might be thinking. How can someone be racist towards an animal? Now is a great time to revisit that question I asked earlier. I asked for us to pretend for a moment that we are not talking about dogs. What would we say about all this then? I think it's safe to say majority of us would find it all very immoral and racist. The connection of stereotyping dog breeds with the occurrence of racism in humans was made when the scholars were investigating the perception and expectations of dog breeds. They determined this connection is due to it following the same process in the human brain. Type classifications seemingly satisfy a human's need to reduce a complex, multi-dimensional issue and turn it into a simplistic and populist one-dimensional factor, to quote their words. The reality of the situation is that animal behaviors need to be acknowledged as having both biological and cultural components, as research has consistently suggested that breed type alone is a poor indicator of aggression towards humans. Unfair judgment of breed-specific dangers continues to be practiced despite evidence to the contrary. Instead, the focus needs to be and should be on the evidence behind the dog's behavior, referring to the context of the situation and the human influence. The scholars made suggestions of ways to minimize negative incidents from occurring. Their main suggestion is education, educating people on training and social awareness. The more educated we are on the problematic dog ownership factors and the measures needed for preventing biting incidents from occurring, the sooner we can simultaneously improve animal welfare and society's safety. We really need to learn how to check our perceptions because they can often be distorted. Enlightening people to check their stereotypes and take an educated approach, look at all of the evidence before jumping to conclusions about a dog breed. The abuse and neglect these innocent souls endure simply because they have a look is appalling, to say the least. While protecting people from injuries is based on good intentions, the law itself is not only completely unjust, but a total failure. The research supports the need for a public shift of perception. It's time to look at it as an individual, case-by-case problem, not a breed problem. I hope the evidence I presented reinforces this message and helps people check their stereotypes, leaving them behind for good. The animals of this world deserve better. Our loyal, loving us unconditionally companions deserve so much more from us. I hope for the innocent and vulnerable members of our society, we added a few more Good Samaritans to the good fight. They might not have a voice to stick up for themselves, but we can be that voice. Being the voice for the voiceless, standing up to injustices, and never backing down is the right thing to do. We know our dogs would do the same for us. Let's be worthy of that love and loyalty. Let's hold the human element accountable. Let's save our innocent and vulnerable souls from abusers. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my research on the misconception of dog breeds.